All right, our next presentation is called the Building Blocks of the Scott River Recovery Action Plan Project, the Hydrogeomorphic Study. The Hydrogeomorphic Study contains the Scott River Recovery Action Plan Project intends to evaluate the watershed-wide hydrological and geomorphic processes in sediment routing pattern. An augmentary Larry Walker and Associates Scott Valley integrated hydrologic model by coupling with LWA's hydrologic and groundwater modeling tool with system-wide hydrologic and sediment transport models of the mainstream Scott River. We will assess existing conditions of channel hydraulics, surface water, groundwater interactions, and sediment transport systems. We aim to identify and prioritize specific restoration actions that consider watershed-wide sediment conditions and hydraulic connectivity by overlaying a geomorphic process assessment with a coupled groundwater surface water models and an understanding of habitat, fish, and agricultural development. This pillar of the SRRAPP will provide detailed information to support the development of a comprehensive holistic river action plan with prioritized recovery actions and identified benefits and challenges. We will integrate and leverage multiple existing planning and design efforts into the larger watershed setting to gain momentum toward a project implementation phase of SRRAPP. Identified actions. April Sawyer is a senior eco-hydrologist at CBEC Eco Engineering in West Sacramento, California. April has an NS from the University of Montana in fluvial geomorphology and background in hydraulic modeling to assess habitat suitability and restoration design alternatives for various aquatic species. Dr. Scott Wright is a civil engineer with over 25 years of experience in the private sector and government, with expertise in the areas of fluid mechanics, hydraulics, sediment transport, and geomorphology. He is a senior eco-hydrologist at CBEC Eco Engineering. He holds a master's degree from the University of Iowa and a PhD from the University of Minnesota, St. Anthony Falls Laboratory. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming April Sawyer and Dr. Scott Wright.
Mine is my PPI. A lot of acronyms, a lot of letters. I'm April. Scott, where did you go?
I'm back here.
Okay. Thought you followed me on here. He'll be speaking in a little bit. So we're working on the hydrogeomorphic study with CBEC. And I just want to say I have been, and this is something that Jenny Hoffman said, really impressed with this group of people. And we've come together and share different views and perspectives and talk about the values and talk about different things. So it's been great to be a part of it. We also recognize that we're in our faces here. So I want to continue to meet all of you. We'll see how this quicker because we'll let you know if you do these things. All right, so we're going to be talking today. We've got 60 minutes. We are in the earlier stages of our work compared to many of the people who are presented here today. So we have less, we'll plot the data and talk more about what we're doing and how we're planning to integrate things. So maybe we'll have a little bit of extra time at the end. But I think that's a really key thing is that we're building onto the very vast body of knowledge that you all have been working to build together and trying to integrate additional tools into that, not just create something new for the sake of creating something new, but augment and further improve our ability to use predictive tools to answer hard questions. So we'll talk about the background and objectives, talk about our approach. We've got a schedule, obviously, and we'll get time is of the essence. So we're working hard on this, and then we can get to some Q&A, and then we'll try to get down a little bit. You all know who Laura is. We're a team, Patrice and Chris. So we're working with them. We worked with LWA, also on another river in Central California, the Columbus River, doing some similar things we're talking about in the beginning to be here. So it's great to be able to work again on this team. I'm the project manager on this project. Chris Hammersmark is the project director, so you may be familiar with him that you can talk to SRRAPP or things like that. I've worked with Chris since 2010 when I started at CBEC. I also worked with Toby Stegman. I think maybe a couple of you may be familiar with him. He is kind of our modeling technical advisor and everything related to development modeling. Coding with the code processing, thinking about habitat, and then Scott will be up here a little bit, a lot of experience in the transport geomorphology and development modeling as well. All right. So the title of our talk is Building Blocks of the SRRAPP River Recovery Project. That's double R. But what's at the bottom of this pyramid here is the watershed inputs. There's the flows, external sediment, nutrients, and pollutants, and then right above that is the fluvial geomorphic processes. So, you know, we recognize that there have been people like Sawyer who have done studies about sediment sources in the 90s, early 2000s. But there hasn't been a lot more recent data collection and understanding about how sediment is, where it's coming from, and how it's moving through the system, and then therefore how does that affect how things are operating now, and then also how can if we choose to make changes within the system, how is that all interconnected and talking to each other in a longitudinal upstream, downstream, and lateral direction. And that's all in kind of supporting the processes at the water and sediment level are supporting the habitat. So this was a kind of nice graphic for the kind of RMP that I thought was really kind of show the concept of the building blocks that we're trying to work with. So the restoration action agenda of the IFRP references the 2018 Scott River Watershed Council Westside Tributary Study or Restoring Priority Coho Habitats a lot. And so we're kind of using that as one of our foundational pieces to launch from. There's a lot of work kind of overlaying some of the key things that we think we want to continue to look into. So we're related to sediment and water connectivity in the system. We recognize that there are others already working in the Callahan Dredge tailings. So that's not really a kind of priority area for us at this point. We want to continue to understand what's going on there. But that's not part of our study. We also recognize that there are others working in the space related to water rights and stream flows. And like, again, want to keep an understanding of what's going on there and continue. We'll be working with Laura and integrating our understanding of that through coordinated integrated surface water and groundwater models. But that's not necessarily the space we're working in either. We're working within the box at the bottom, which is thinking about restoring floodplain connectivity, creating refuge habitats, creating complexity, diverse hydraulic environments for diverse biotic environment or use. And we're trying to do that at the watershed scale and thinking about that interconnectedness, but with specific interest feeding into the main stem, how it functions. We also are thinking about like to reconfigure specific areas to increase the frequency and duration of lateral connectivity. So what are the opportunities to set back levees or think about decision reversal in key areas? So we're working kind of within those concept areas. Looking again to the 2018 West Side Trades Report, the Watershed Council, Eric produced a bunch of great maps that we continue to look at and think about how we can build on. On the far left is the connectivity base law. That's something that, again, with Laura's continued development of her models, she's got a growing understanding of that. The graph or the figure in the middle is survey reaches with highest corporate density. So that's at least the study is focusing in the TRIVs, but we recognize that there's kind of a bit of a dearth of information on this property. Again, building on what's going with it. And then the concept of overlaying different metrics to create a prioritization ranking is something we also want to build upon. So on the right, the confinement score in the 22 report, availability or presence of riparian vegetation and presence of water combined. And then areas in the red and yellow have the lowest score, least availability of the combination of those three, and areas in blue have the highest score. So how can we build on that with these tools? All right, so the next two slides have kind of a lot of words. After this, we'll go back to a lot less words. So, apologize. So our objectives here are to really think at the watershed scale about opportunities for recovery actions. And in order to do that, we're going to assess groundwater and surface water interactions by coupling Laura's SBIHM, groundwater modeling, and hydrology. We're using hydrology as inputs to our surface water hydraulic models. Varying resolution hydraulic and sediment models. So with a hydraulic model, we can move through the system. Laura talked about the wanting to assess upland impacts and think about those impacts on water budget and how fire and land use changes are impacting the landscape. So that's not something that's so much our focus, but we're coordinating with Laura on that. We're working to evaluate a watershed-wide geomorphic processes and sediment routing patterns to define different process reaches. Where is sediment coming from? Where is it being stored? For how long? What types of recurrence interval events move sediment through the system? And perform some different assessments to kind of get that clean picture of the system so that we can then understand, change it. How does that impact it? We want to identify and prioritize specific restoration actions that consider watershed-wide conditions and hydraulic connectivity by overlaying those geomorphic processes assessments with the groundwater surface water models, and also an understanding of who's using it. So keep hearing from you all about the different requirements for water. We understand that and we want to be sensitive to that, and as we're kind of going through eventually to a prioritization of restoration actions layer, which we're working with Jenny, who talked to you about the structured decision-making process. So these tools will all come together down the line in that direction. Point I made earlier, we want to really integrate and leverage all of the efforts that have been done to date. So learn from you all and keep building on it. And in the end, maybe people just don't want another study. You want to see yellow metal, get something done. So kind of the essence, trying to move in that direction where it makes sense and see if we can do some sort of concept of pilot projects, things like that to gain momentum. With the buy-in, obviously, of the community. We also are, and so this is one of the pillars of the SRRAPP, is the physical energy study combined with structured decision-making, economics. And our area of interest is from Mainstem Scott River, from SBEC to USGS gauge. We do have some of the tributaries represented as well in our hydraulic model, with specific interest in French, please. All right, a few more words and go back to more pictures. So in leading to those objectives, there were just, these are a list of questions that we started out with. That we're working on investigating. Again, we're early in the process. We don't have the answers yet right now, but what we're looking for. How does the hydrology of the whole watershed function and impact on the water balance in Scott River, and what are the best locations for upland and edge valley water retentions? We'll talk with you a little bit about that. What are the surface and subsurface conditions of the Scott River and its tributaries to recover flow for fish and also human water requirements? How much incision reversal is needed to increase the processes that support groundwater recharge? Thinking about the way that meadows function and widening of shallower, wider channels, you get shallower groundwater. Can we do things like that to provide improved sediment deposition, retention, and enhance overall conditions? How is sediment routed from the tribs through the main stem? What regions are going dry and when? And are any beaches perched due to previous disturbances that have changed the profile of the river? And where in the watershed should projects be focused or directed using kind of prioritized list actionable restoration strategies? And coming through the structured decision. All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm Scott Wright. Don't call me Dr. Scott Wright, please. It's Scott is preferred. Yeah, so I'm gonna take over for April here a little bit and just talk about some of the technical work that we're gonna be doing as part of this project, focusing on these two elements. The geomorphic assessments, which is basically us kind of updating previous work that's been done. You know, especially the Summer Strong study was really well done. It's excellent work, but it was published in 1990, right? That was mentioned earlier. So it's been 35 years. So yeah, we studied that carefully, and we're gonna be doing a lot of the same sorts of analyses, but the tools available, the data available now, especially the remote sensing tools and data are light years ahead of what they had to work with back then. So that's gonna be a big part of it. And the main thing there is establishing the existing conditions of the system right now, right? We need to update that, and then also looking back at the historical conditions, just for context, right? Not necessarily because we're saying, oh, we're looking to restore the river to the way it was in 1950 or anything like that. It's not feasible, right? Restoration is kind of, I think rehabilitation is probably a better word in the community than restoration, because it's very difficult to go back to previous conditions. But understanding historical conditions is really useful just in terms of providing context to what we're looking at now and what could potentially we could be looking at in the future. And so I'll talk about how we're gonna do that learning with some new LiDAR and some image acquisition, looking at historical air photos and comparing them to the new photos, and what we're going to do in terms of delineating geomorphic features in the air photos. Pretty standard sort of geomorph work through time and documenting how the river has changed to provide that context for looking forward. And then I'll move on to another major component of the work, which is the predictive tool development. And this ties back into what Jenny was talking about earlier, structured decision making, or any alternative analysis or decision making. The predictive tools are what allows us to basically, evaluate. Let's say, we're doing structured decision making. You come up with your decision objectives. You come up with performance measures for each of those decision objectives. Some of them can be quantified using predictive tools like hydraulic models, sediment transport models. Some of them are more qualitative, like Jenny talked about, doing interviews and such. I've worked with Jenny on other structured decision-making projects, so we have a good feel for how to do that. But the tools are what, we're going to develop these tools that allow you to say, hey, if we want to do, X, Y, and Z alternatives, run the models, quantify the habitat or whatever change you're looking at, and then put that back into the structured decision-making process to support making a final decision. Okay, next slide. Okay, so sort of the backbone of our study here is this bathymetric LiDAR collection that was done in October of 2024. Bathymetric LiDAR, so there's a couple different kinds of LiDAR. I don't know if you're all familiar with LiDAR. LiDAR is basically, light detection and ranging. It's lasers from a plane in a swath to map elevations on the Earth's surface. And it gives you incredibly high density data. It's incredibly valuable, so much better than the way we used to do it on the ground with survey rods and GPS and such. And then there's there's a couple different kinds of LiDAR. There's green LiDAR, which is just, will penetrate the water, right? So it's a different wavelength of light. Red LiDAR doesn't do that. And so we had green LiDAR flown from the main stem and up the tributaries a little bit in October 2024. At about 100 miles of river channel, and it maps the entire channel. So a couple of examples so you can see the level of detail. And then we got really high resolution imagery as well, 3-inch pixel size on the ground. So we'll be able to map out all these different features in the river and then also in French Creek. So that the green LiDAR, the bathy LiDAR we mostly did in the channels where there was water. And then for French Creek, as Betsy mentioned earlier, we're working on that project with her, and so we got a new red LiDAR flag in the entire French Creek watershed at very high resolution, which will help us map out sediment sources and supply and such. And I'll talk a little bit about that in another slide. So this is like really, and this will provide all the information we need for the modeling as well. So this is a very important data set that was collected, and we've been looking there. It was flown in October. We just got it like a couple of weeks ago. We've been looking at it. It looks really, really nice. And so we're really excited to really dig into it and do some analysis and get the models up and running. Next slide. Okay, yeah, this is a quick one just to show some examples of the results of the LiDAR. So these are elevation maps with the color shading just being different elevations and a couple of different places in the valley, just showing the incredible amount of detail that you get. And that it, penetrates the water, gets down to the bottom of the channels where there is water. And we had a map a swath around the river that will allow us to look at the channel and a little bit of part of the floodplain. And then there's also, I think LiDARs from 2018 that we will stitch in for floodplain parts that probably haven't changed much since 2018, but we'll be doing DEM differencing. There's been a couple of LiDAR data sets. I can't remember the exact dates. I'm sorry, I should have looked that up before this, but we'll do what's called DEM differencing, which is just taking these surfaces like this and just subtracting, like this is a 2024 surface, subtract the 2018 surface, and then you can see where the changes have happened. It kind of tells you how the river is migrating or getting deeper or shallower or whatever it's doing. It's a really nice technique with these high resolution maps to be able to see how the river has changed through time. Okay, next slide. This is an example. I'll have to walk you through a little bit here about exactly what this is. But we're going to be doing a whole bunch of stuff with this LiDAR data set, but a lot of it's going to be focused on understanding how the river has changed and also understanding the geomorphic features in the river now. Because April mentioned, she showed the map that Eric made of confinement. That's one of the things that we're really interested in, because confinement of the river has big implications for geomorphology and habitat and just channel complexity, basically. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. But this is so with the LiDAR data set, one thing you can do is look at the longitudinal profile of the river to see if there are pools and ripples or alternate bars and meanders and such. And so this example on the right, I guess it's right for you guys, the top right is a detrended longitudinal profile. And so a longitudinal profile is just a trace of the lowest point of the channel as you're moving downstream. This is for the Klamath River. So that on the left at Iron Gate Dam, all the way down to the estuary. Similar data set was collected prior to the dam removal. And so so if you detrending basically means you take out the valley slope. And so if you didn't detrend it, there'd be thousands of feet of drop and you wouldn't even see these fluctuations here. But when you detrend it, then it's basically zero elevation everywhere. And the fluctuations are the small scale pools and ripples, basically. It kind of looks like an EKG. So you can see as you move downstream, the pools get deeper, the ripples get a little bit higher. You'll see reaches where, you know, it sort of it pitches up, and like if there's a geologic control, or if it's a straight section that's been levied or something like that, you'll see less elevation deviation. And that's what, and so in the bottom plot, it's just to zoom in a couple of kilometers of the top one, and you can go in, these red dots are crossings basically. And so the high points are ripple, the low points are pool, and you can you know, write code to go through and get every ripple crest and every pool depth and get that elevation difference between the pools and the ripples. And that tells you a lot about what the river is doing, right? Because that's tied in closely with the lateral variability too. The differences you don't have pools and ripples in a straight channel, basically. So once you start developing alternate bars and meanders, you start to see these elevation differences increase. And so documenting that is a really good metric for the health of a river. Essentially, if it's moving sediment through and it's got room to move around, you're going to see these elevation differences. And so that's one analysis that we'll be doing. Excellent. And then so that's sort of like looking at that elevation changes, and another analysis we'll do is looking at the landform changes. And we're going to leverage some work that I was involved in on the Trinity River with Jenny Curtis, who some of you might know. I'm a former USGS employee, worked with Jenny on this Trinity River project. And this was basically mapping out all of the geomorphic features on historical aerial photos and then comparing how those change through time. So this is just the report here. If anybody wants to go take a look at it, we might not have all the same features. We might make some changes, but we're going to kind of follow the methods that Jenny and others developed for that. And these tables just show all these different attributes that you have to define before you start going in and digitize, like the main channel, you know, whether it's a floodplain, islands, all these different upland featured bars, whether they're active, whether they're moving, that type of thing. And that allows you to, you know, and then you can do that by reach. So I'll show a couple of examples of that. Go ahead and see it. Yeah, so this is an example from that Trinity River report that we're gonna replicate, just showing it's basically a big GIS digitizing project where you know georectify all the air photos, and then you find your attributes, and then you go through and basically digitize. Oh, this is a bar, it's got some vegetation on it. This is an active bar, it's not vegetated. This is an alcove, and then so you digitize all those for the different aerial photos, and then next slide. And then you can basically sum up all of the area of those different attributes, right? So this table here is active bars, aquatic wetland, split flow channel, side channel, alcove, exposed bedrock. We might have some different definitions for the SCOP. Like I said, you can develop these stacked bar charts. There's a lot of different ways you can analyze the data. So this has different dates with these stacked bar chart, and then different beaches. So all of the different reaches from upstream to downstream, showing how much area of each of these features there are. So that'll give you a really good picture of how a river's change both longitudinally and through time in terms of the active features, bars, and other geomorphic features. So we're gonna implement this for the Scott River, and I think it'll probably provide really good context to, like I said, the existing condition of the river now, as well as the historical conditions and how it's changed. Okay, we've gotten started on this a little bit, so I'm gonna show a couple of examples here real quick, not really get into the details, but we've been, along with Eric at the council, we've been digging through the historical photos for the valley and getting those geo-rectified. And then we have these new photos from 2024 that we'll be looking at as well. But this just shows an example. Let's see, where is this? Upstream from Horn Lane, I think. So 1951 aerial photo, 1976, and then 2022, just showing how, you know, the changes that have happened over this time period, with the river basically becoming less complex through time. Next slide. And this is just a similar example from further downstream in the valley, just north of the airport. Again, showing the 51 photo, got a little bit more complexity, especially over in Kidder Creek. 76, it's less complex, and then in 2022, You know, it's straight in a lot of the regions without much connection to the floodplain. So we'll be doing this. We're gonna sort through the historical photos and then, you know, do an analysis of the flows during that time period to figure out. We probably won't do this on every single air photo because it's a lot of work, a lot of digitizing, but we'll find the ones that have the most relevance in terms of if a major flood occurred or some other event occurred that we want to quantify and then do the digitizing on those and some of the changes so we understand how the rivers changed through time. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah, I got a couple pictures in here. We've been out here the last couple of days. The field tour yesterday was amazing. I've worked in the Klamath Basin quite a bit on the dam removal and then the Trinity, but not as much in the Scott Valley. So it's been really good to get out and see the river. And so this is a picture of sort of of a reef downstream from Island Road where it's heavily confined, right? I think it's the high score and Eric's confinement is like a red line in that GIS layer, and you can see it's straight, it's deep, and it's incised, and so that's not a typical natural condition for a river. Rivers really do want to move around when they're not put between riprap, and so. I mean, there are straight rivers, but it's pretty uncommon. There's a lot of research that's been done showing that, you know, if you start out with a straight channel, you know, this can be shown numerically or in a plume and just give a little perturbation to the width, and it just starts this positive feedback mechanism that starts eroding out to the bank. Point water starts forming and you go through the alternate water sequence to meandering, right? So this is not really a natural condition, and it doesn't provide much complexity or variability across the channel, right? It's like a canal, basically, or a flood control channel. So next slide. This is a really, really neat example, I think, of geomorphology in action. This is just downstream of Eller Lane 2 days ago. And so what you can see here, the flow is obviously going down the photo, and on the right, there's some vegetation in the channel and some debris got racked up on it, which forced the flow to the left. And then so you have this steepened little ripple with some waves on it. And that then, the feedback from that is that it formed an eddy or a recirculating eddy over here on River Wright. And that causes this gravel deposition of this huge bar, which then is kicking the flow out to River Left and eroding that left bank. So this is like a really neat example of what rivers do and why they bend and meander, because there's these positive feedback mechanisms that in the right conditions, right, it'll just continue until the meanderment cuts off. It depends on the slope and the grain sizes of the river, but it happens in pretty much any river that it's trying to do this, because it's just a straight channel is just not really stable. Once you have any kind of perturbation like this, this rejam here basically is what kind of caused this to happen. And so that's why, you know, the Corps, when they do their flood control work, they kind of get rid of these and armor the banks, and then the river takes care of that sediment that's in the channel. This is a much more natural situation.
Humans built that. Gary Black.
Yeah, he built, yeah, he did all that. Okay. Thank you for that. I wasn't sure about that. That worked well, except it's eroded back on the left. You can see there's riprap on the bank. Next one. So this is further upstream, looking upstream from Moore Lane, and this is kind of like more, you know, what you would expect a river to look like in this valley, I think, with its slope and sediment conditions, same flow. You can see the bottom. It's not straight and deep. You've got some complexity laterally across the channel, right? So this is a further upstream too, so it's steeper, but yeah, this is a little bit more what you would expect to see, I think, in this geomorphic situation like this. So I just wanted to provide, you know, some examples of, I mean, you all see this stuff every day, right? But it's good for me to get out there and see the differences and just start thinking about, you know, what can be done to kind of get things looking a little bit more natural like this would be. All right, what are we doing this time?
We're halfway.
Okay. So that's Okay, so I'm gonna, so that's the geomorphic assessment part. This part I probably won't take too long. I'm just gonna talk about the predictive model, predictive tool development, which in the workhorse for this is gonna be SRRAPP, which is a really common, public domain software, published or produced by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Hydrogeomorphic Engineering Center. And so it has a lot of different flexibility that's going to be great for this project. We can do sort of one-dimensional flow, which means just treating the channel as cross sections with no lateral variability. Those are good models for sort of gaming out we're looking at groundwater, surface water interactions, which we're going to be doing, but also for sediment transport, and it simplifies things. It can also do a two-dimensional model, which allows basically lateral variability in the channel. And so we're going to be doing both of those kinds of models. As I mentioned earlier, the green ladder will be the basis for the model. The topography is so important to have good topography for these hydraulic models. If you have good bathymetry and topography, you are set basically, because they're basically solving, mass conservation of mass and momentum equations, just gravity moving water downhill. And if you have the topography resolved really well and it's accurate, the models behave really well and produce really good results. We're in good shape there. And then we'll be calibrating the model to observe data. And then we'll get calibration done, and then they'll be available to evaluate different alternatives in the future. And again, another major component of this is we're going to be coupling this model to Laura's groundwater model, so that we can look at groundwater, surface water interactions and try to get a better handle on what's controlling that. This is just some graphics that just show some examples of what the output is from the model, from these SRRAPP models. We have started building these out. So the one on the right here is is a 1D model of the lower part of the valley, and you see these green lines. So this is the cross-section based model, where you just get basically the average depth and velocity in each of those cross sections. So it doesn't really tell you much about what's going on laterally. And those are it's good for an initial start for looking at flooding and trying to get things right. And then in the middle is a more complicated 2D model, where you just have rectangular grids across the channel and the floodplain, so you can simulate the entire floodplain and get the lateral variability as well as the longitudinal variability. And then the one on the left is just like a neat graphic that you can make once you have a model result to show, if you did something into a levee or something like that, how it would affect the flooding. Don't spend too much time on what's actually flooded here, because this is an uncalibrated model. We're just getting these spun up. But I just wanted to show these an example of kind of like the outputs that you can get, and the visualizations that you can make to understand what's happening with the river in terms of the hydraulics. The other thing about the 2D models is you basically get depth and velocity in every cell, and then there's a lot of habitat suitability indices out there for salmon and other species that say, hey, they like velocity between this and this, they like depth between this and this, and so you have that information in each cell, and you can say, okay, well, this cell has a habitat suitability of, it's usually from 0 to 1, and you can sum that all up, and it's really good for analyzing alternatives to see, okay, are you creating more good habitat or not? And so that's part of the plan. All right. Okay, yeah, so this is something that we have done in the past with Laura. This is the linking HEC-RAS to ModFlow. So ModFlow is the groundwater model that for the integrated hydrologic model that Laura's been working on for a while. And so basically, we're going to do this couple version of it. I won't get into details here, but it allows you to run the HEC-RAS model, or provide information from that to ModFlow, run ModFlow, provide that back to HEC-RAS model in terms of how much water is exchanging between the surface water, the channel, and the groundwater. So it's really useful if you want to be looking at groundwater recharge, for example. You can run a hydraulic model. Let's say, well, we open up this floodplain, get water out there, and we can calculate the infiltration rate, and then run ModFlow and see that increase in infiltration, how that affects the groundwater, and then how that in turn goes back to the hydraulic model to potentially support water in the channel, and look at the different reaches. So this hasn't been done here. This is kind of researchy to some degree. It's not usually done. Usually you're doing a groundwater model, you're doing a surface water model. We know they're connected sometimes, but not that often. But in the Scott Valley, it's definitely important. And so we're going to spend some time getting this dialed in, and I think it'll be a really good tool for understanding, because that just being under, heard a lot of questions about, oh, if you manage to recharge out of that flows in the river, and it's really, it's hard to understand that because there's all these spatial variability going on, and there's a time lag, right? And so having some predictive models that can help us understand what implications are of recharge, well, I think will really help the conversation. That's it. No, I got one more. Yeah, so Betsy already talked about this, so I won't get into too much detail, but we're going to be working with her and her team, and another consultant, PCI, who's going to be doing the design work for French Creek. And this is, Betsy was talking a little bit about the decomposed granite, and there's a lot of questions about whether or not that's like a new thing, or if it's natural, or something going on up in the watershed. And so we're going to be helping her address that by well, this LiDAR collection for one thing. We have this really high resolution LiDAR, which we should be able to see erosion scarps and such, and what's going on with the roads. With previous LiDAR, we can also do this DEM differencing from. We'll be doing some other GIS analysis, just of slope and aspect and things like that are computing erosion potential basically for the entire watershed. And then estimating loads from various tributaries to French Creek. So just getting hydraulic information from the different tributaries and calculating sediment transport rates, and then developing sediment budgets on a reach basis so we can figure out, where's the sediment coming from, where is it being transported to, where is it being stored, how much is coming out of each tributary, how much is coming out of French Creek, because this is obviously a really important tributary. And so we'll construct a conceptual sort of semi-quantitative model or diagram to the transport pathways. We're not going to do like a full sediment transport or rainfall runoff model. It's kind of beyond the scope of what we need. I think what we need is just like a more conceptual understanding of like I said, where the sediment's coming from, where it's depositing, if there's reaches where it's eroding, and ultimately what its fate is. And we'll be doing a similar thing on the main stem in terms of sediment transport, but we'll be doing a really focused analysis on sediment and erosion and deposition within French Creek, specifically focused on the decomposed granite, but also the spawning gravel sizes as well. So I think that's it for me.
All right, this is kind of just refreshing everyone back. We're working on the building blocks here. I don't think we can figure out too much more, but so the building blocks think about processes. I know that process-based restoration is very in vogue right now. It's something that is necessary, but I also think it's a strategy that can make sense into other things as well. So we kind of want to talk generally about our recovery approach to the table from CBEC and some helpful to think about what to be thinking about how to restore or recover property. And the first one is to just think about the root cause of generation in the system. Schools and are thinking about historical aerial imaging and build that understanding. Also, looking for literature for that. And then once we have that kind of bit of an understanding, we want to be thinking about, all right, well, if we change something here, like the property, let it to get to this point and change it, how will it react? And make sure that we're not just taking individual actions without considering upstream or downstream impact. We need to be thinking at a watershed scale. That's the big thing here is in California, don't just do one thing in one place, but all interconnected. And it's a long-term endeavor, which isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do. But it doesn't mean that we should discount the value of form-based approaches, like what I see from there. People in French Creek are putting in specific habitat types into the area for the purpose of building habitat now. So trying to mix that in as well and have both thinking about how we can reverse incision in some places that will take longer, but also so we can find out some other places to bring habitat in a year. And think about how those two, you do one and the other, how they interact. All right, so next, and we don't have, specific actions out of right now, so we're going through, but we just kind of wanted to show and share some ideas and things we've done in other places. To tackle some of the same concerns related to improving migration corridors, improving off-channel habitat and corresponding habitat, increasing the frequency and duration along when water is on footprints for fish to review. And so this is a project that's just downstream of the project that Matt promised and talked about it yesterday, involved with implementing just in this farm field upstream of model downstream. But this, you can see the existing conditions of the water's extent to existing conditions on Buteau Creek, which is in thank you. This is a press management project. But so near the coast, with a very similarly single thread channel that is relatively incised, blue, in the blue upstream portion, not really getting out on the floodplain, flow shown there. And what we did was to go in and place some of these roughness structures, earthwork structures to push flow out of banks onto the floodplain. And there are 5 different locations that happens, relatively low amount of impact and grading, and it's just kind of put something there to kick water out into preferential flow pathways that are already out on the floodplain. So the pink is the post-project indication for the same flow as modeled in the existing condition. Another project we worked on in the Sacramento Valley, so this is in the heart of Sacramento, just downstream is the Southport Levee Setback Project. This is a very large levee through the heart of metropolitan Sacramento. But it was, for a multi-benefit project, intended to support, flood control through the system by setting levee back, giving more space, attenuating peaks of floods, but also providing floodplain habitat for rearing people in the springtime along this the large Sacramento River. So there's a couple different bends that the levee was set back upon. You can see north and south, and a bench built, graded in, the new levee behind it, and a bunch of planting and wood structures placed on the floodplain to increase complexity and how nothing can be covered for the fish swimming around on the floodplain. There's a video showing the inundation in January 23, that all underwater. Another program that we've been involved in, also through Sacramento, through the newest fish hatchery, is the Lower American River Salmon Habitat Enhancement Program. And so this is, again, needing to think about a river-wide programmatic approach to tackling a lack of spawning habitat and also a lack of rearing habitat at the same time. And so over the course of kind of late aughts to 2000 aughts to up to within the last couple of years, we've been implementing alternating ground augmentation, wood placement in off-channel habitats along this area. And so these are just examples of finding the right opportunity areas to build in the right habitat and the right part of the system, considering this for other goals. All right, so back here, we're thinking watershed wide. Trying to rush this up the other day, yesterday, about really trying to think about this as a whole, because it would probably take many small actions throughout the watershed at various elevations, meadows, lowlands, to be able to have an impact. And so our tools are going to be able to help assess that. And we can potentially think about opportunities to modify the channels along the migration corridor, which is so this is one of our maps of stream confinement. The red being the Fort Jones, where Kidder Creek comes in. The red portion there is the most confined reach, and then above that is moderately confined. So in area, in some of those areas, or anywhere that is even moderately confined, where are there opportunities for doing not wide scale levy setbacks, but if it's landowner, access based, and a buy-in for pockets of habitat that can perform the functions that we're talking about. Are there opportunities to help figure out ways to have a bench of land at different elevations and have a floodplain bench along here and have a riparian corridor? Those types of things. There are also, just look at the master areas where the pivots don't reach. And are those potential opportunity areas that we manage differently, still farmed, but we just differently and have an opportunity for a kind of connected nodes along, or rest stops, call them along the migration corridor, and to allow for a little bit of high quality habitat can be connected through. And this is back to the combination of confinement, riparian, and water-based. So the areas that are in yellow and red have the most potential. So a couple more slides here. We just got a few more slides. So this tools that we're developing, we can kind of look at things from very, very large scale down to a very small scale. And Scott showed the 2D hydraulic models that you can simulate depending on how fast your computers are and how long you want to wait for your model simulations to run. You can calculate the depth and velocity on grid levels across any given area that you're interested in. A very small resolution if you provide it. And you can create the map of inundation for what land activates inundate. Now, over a long time period, it can run different water years, run entire water years, or just run representative fills, and then start to be able to calculate water year based statistics and think about how connected system functions and where opportunities lie. You can use that to identify and prioritize sites. You can use the criteria that comes from structured decision making to kind of layer that in, and then kind of the finance resolution is taking that down. Okay, well, if we have a site with willing landowner and these other opportunities, how does our concept actually pencil out on paper? So you can take your existing condition and your project condition and look at the acre days of inundation, acre days of habitat, how many acres of habitat is being, how many days of course what water year, or given water year. We've also used this to just think about recharge rates, not necessarily connected to groundwater modeling in the past, but we're interested in exploring that further with Laura. So we can kind of take it from large scale to small scale and then iterate through, all right, how much earthwork does that look like for a given site and help with the costs and with that as well pretty rapidly. So what this looks like, that process, I'm gonna go through a series of maps here, and an example from another river, but we have our digital elevation model. Derived from LiDAR, which with cross section, 1D model defined here, and so you develop your hydraulic model. And with that hydraulic model, you can create the surface water elevation. And kind of project that out to the toes of the hillside and look at for a given any flow that you choose, base flow, a 2-year recurrent yield flow, 3-year recurrent flow, whatever you choose. Project out the water surface elevation for the whole area. And then you can look at height above river. So for that flow, we call it base flow. Where is the elevation of the land, regardless of how it's connected? If there's a levee there or not. What is the height of the land relative to your flow values that you've chosen? And that, in this particular case, the warmer colors are high, the cooler colors are low or easier to connect. You also produce a depth map. So the darker blue, the deeper, and the lighter blues are shallow. And then you can layer in current reality. Where do you have berms, field berms, levees, other infrastructure that limits the lateral or longitudinal conveyance of water, and look at what's for a range of flows that you look at, or a particular flow, what's connected and what's disconnected. And you start to see potential opportunity areas in what's connected, how to better connect it, or if something's disconnected. There's an opportunity to connect that with that. And then you can run a range of flows on the floodplain activation panel. The darker colors are lower flows and the warmer colors are higher flows. So you can see at what flow in activation map, and you can kind of grade out parcel based on parcel, based on whether geomorphic process reaches, and these reaches are higher priority, these are lower. Layer that on top, and then take it down to, okay, well, we've identified a specific area where we'd like to iterate through some concept designs and look at what it costs this particular location. And then you iterate within that cycle. So really fun tools to work with. We nerd out on them all the time with great pictures, and they're really good for you can create online web pages that show, you can bring to a landowner meeting and show this is how a 10-year flood or a certain flow that looks like, and create an animation, and you can look at that and look at how it impacts inundation and work through what works, what doesn't work, and tweaking to what works and doesn't work for us. So this is my last slide. Content, our timeline. We are in the model development phase. As Scott mentioned, we collected our LiDAR. We are building our models, dropping in that new LiDAR into the models, moving data from the Watershed Council, Laura, and others to calibrate, and working through historical channel changes right now, taking those aerial images, thinking about how they change through time, going through our system conditions analysis, and then after Jenny has talked with our folks and we work with SRRAPP, start to work for our some potential projects, and we'd like to use some of Laura's PRMS hydrology for future conditions assessment, thinking about changes in climate, how would that affect future conditions if projects are implemented as well, and come out with a report that's kind of a standalone appendix to the SRRAPP. And all along. We want to continue to talk to people, so continue doing outreach, hear what's important, hear where the opportunities are. And yeah.
Oh, just one question.
It's great from your, what are your slides you talked about acquisition of water rights from adjacent person. I'm concerned there that you may take it viable agricultural production off that parcel and susceptible to development. Can you comment on that, please?
That was from the integrated restoration and monitoring plan document, and I tried to highlight there that other people are thinking in that space, but that's not something that we are working on. That's not something that necessarily proposing or analyzing. We're in the physical space of how the water and sediment move on the land, but not necessarily trying to.
I don't know, it's a concern I raise because I've seen viable agricultural activity of different kinds just disappear. So it makes it more susceptible to other use.
Totally understand the concern, and I think that's something we'll keep in mind, but
Well, we got the Scott Valley plan that militates against that. You know the Scott Valley plan?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, it means you can't develop the ag land. The prime ag land.
Purity talks.
You'd have to change,
See that
you have to change the
happening
plan.
on a federal level.
We can keep that from happening. ever.